How's everyone doing? Last guest, and perhaps our most distinguished guest. So I don't know if many of you know, but Jimmy Nguyen has probably done more for the Bitcoin SV community than anybody not named Calvin or Craig. And what I wanted to do is I just wanted to have a chat and talk a little bit. And as I'm hearing, this may be the last time we see you in an official capacity in front of this crowd, right?
Yes.
So how does it feel to be on that side?
Great. So much more relaxing.
So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go back in time, and then I wanted to have a future look. So I want to hear the story of how you got involved in the very first place, at the very beginning, because you were an IP lawyer, you were working in LA, and then all of a sudden you got somehow immersed in this whole Bitcoin thing. How did it happen?
So for those of you who don't know me, I was an IP and digital technology lawyer for about 21 years. I started legal practice right at the height of the dot-com boom in the mid-1990s. So I made a lot of my legal career focused on helping companies navigate the explosion of internet and digital technology. And so I was a partner in 3 major law firms by the end of my legal career. And I represented everything from startups to big multinationals like Amazon, Microsoft, Uber, consortia like the Blu-ray Encryption Consortium and Motion Picture Association of America. Bitcoin started coming into my life around 2012, I would say, when as a tech lawyer, you're always having to pay attention to whatever's the new trend. I had a lot of clients in the online gaming industry, including Calvin Ayers' organization, which I think people may not realize. I've known Calvin for a very, very long time, probably since 2006 or 7. And the online gaming industry was the first industry to start actually adopting Bitcoin as a payment alternative, because a lot of those companies, especially the offshore ones, had challenges getting payment processing and bank services in the United States. And then some of my other more traditional clients, particularly those who had more traditional casual and online video games, started calling me, trying to get advice about creating virtual items, virtual currencies in their games, virtual assets. And one of my fintech clients in Canada, with the name N-Trust at the time, that's where N's come from, we can talk about, started calling me about Bitcoin, and we filed patent applications actually for a virtual currency system that its founder had devised. So that's kind of how Bitcoin started coming into my life. I had to pay attention to it as a lawyer. And then there's a much longer story, but basically in 2015, the name Craig Wright entered my life during a fateful dinner in London. And I learned about his situation in Australia and an effort to acquire the assets of his Australian company, which you now all know about, what was called the De Morgan Group, moved him from Australia to London, set up the company that has now become nChain, one of the largest blockchain R&D firms in the world. And I assisted in that effort behind the scenes, and along the way, got asked if I wanted to leave my legal practice and join what became nChain, which I did, and then became its CEO. And unbeknownst to me, got thrust into the center of the battle over the soul and future of Bitcoin and Bitcoin scaling, and was involved when we decided to support Bitcoin Cash, which was not an idea of Craig's. We did, and so I worked with them in our collaborative efforts with Bitmain and Jihan Wu and Roger Ver and all of the other Bitcoin Cash developer groups. And then when the battle over the future of Bitcoin Cash led to the hash war, that led to the split between BSV and BCH, I led our efforts before and during the famed Bitcoin hash war. And when we split off to on our own persistent chain, got asked to, we needed to form a foundation association to lead BSV. We were not planning to have our own coin going into the hash war. We were really battling over the control of Bitcoin Cash and a scaled version of Bitcoin. When we ended up with our own chain, we said, oh crap, now we need to support a whole new ecosystem, and then I got asked to leave the nChain role and take on the role as president of what is now the Global BSV Association. So that's, there's many, many more infamous steps in between, but that's basically what happened.
So the fact that he's a lawyer will come up later, so I would just want to note that. So I want to go 60,000 feet up in the air, because you've done, as the head of Bitcoin Association, you've done large conferences all over the world.
Yeah.
So Seoul, Korea,
Yes.
London, New York, Dubai. Where else?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
The very first one.
So we're here in New York, and we're obviously a very American-centric audience. What I wanted to get a sense of is, how is Bitcoin being used in these different countries, and do you see specific differences in the way it's being adopted or not in their use cases in these countries?
Talking about Bitcoin or blockchain technology?
However you prefer to answer it.
Yeah, so over the last years, as Mike's mentioned, I've spent most of my life traveling around the world, including to territories that don't have a lot of blockchain technology adoption yet, such as Pakistan recently. I was just in Vietnam for a series of events there. And in Africa, I've been to Rwanda, as Becky Leggero knows, our infamous trip to Rwanda, and Sudan even, places like that. I would say around the world, and even in our Western countries, blockchain technology is at very, very primitive stages. For anyone who reads and talks about all the blockchain adoption that's going on, I think it's very limited. It's limited to trading and the use of blockchain for things such as NFTs or maybe DeFi products that can create fast trading or fast transactions. The use of blockchain technology for data transactions, for smart contracts, for things that people in this room would say are more useful is very, very limited. And a lot of the countries that are really interested in technology and exploring it, their conundrum first is figuring out how to regulate cryptocurrency. The consistent theme I get, particularly, for example, when I've been in Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, Pakistan, is they'll say, Jimmy, we're really interested, this is from government officials too, in growing blockchain technology in our country. We really like you. We like what you have to say about your blockchain. Can we use it without a cryptocurrency? To which I say, no, that's just a fancy database. So a lot of these countries have to get their arms around regulating and permitting the trading of digital assets in a way that their central banks and governments are comfortable with in order to send the signal that blockchain technology is welcome in the country.
And are you seeing distinctions between Solana, Polychain, Ethereum, or is this more, are there distinctions between the different classes of coins, or no?
Depends on who you ask. If you talk to government people, they don't care. Yeah. In fact, they don't know the difference between most of the chains. As government officials, they need to be blockchain agnostic. In different parts of the world, different chains have taken on different levels of activity. Yeah. So it's different in different countries. Part of it is that some of the chains, unlike, let me explain something that's very important to understand about how things get funded in the blockchain and digital asset world. A lot of these people, when they make their own chain, when you make Solana and you initiate a chain, the founders will reserve a bunch of the coins from the minted circulation for creating their own foundation, for giving to the founders themselves, like Vitalik Buterin has from Ethereum, and for creating a pool of coins to fund grants, free coins, free money to startup entrepreneurs and developers, so that they don't have to get equity investment raising from venture capitalists. And I get asked this all the time in my role as president of the BSV Association. Hey, we might want to do our project, our game project, our DeFi project on BSV. Can you give me coins to fund the development and do it? Because we were a split chain from Bitcoin, we did not do that. The founders of BSV did not reserve coins. Like, I've had to answer this question to exchanges when they consider listing BSV. They want to know how many coins the founders have, what's the lockup period, all those things, and the token economics of other chains. And so what chains take off in other countries, especially some of the developing countries, is often driven by which chains have decided to go in there and start offering coins to developers, to universities, for example. So Solana has been doing it a lot in some countries. Near Protocol is a new one that I hear a lot about around the world that's just started coming to my attention in the last 6 months. Like, Near Protocol will probably be the Solana over the next year. So that drives a lot of it, honestly. Binance chain, right? Binance is making a big push around the world. I was in Vietnam. They were all over the Vietnam blockchain conferences. I was in Pakistan with Mohammed Salman Anjum and his local allies. We ran the country's first Pakistan blockchain summit just in January of this year and had meetings with the president and the government ministers. And within 4 months later, we were back for a big tech festival. And guess who was the other key digital asset sponsor there? Binance, because they're preparing to make a big entry into Pakistan. Yeah. And we'll be funding, I'm sure, projects on Binance chain. Yeah. So that's what really affects it. It's not because I think there's something innately about why one chain is better for a particular region. It's where they throw their coins.
Yeah. And so, Zach, I wanted to ask you, Zach is probably the most diehard, even maybe more so than Jimmy, proponent of BSV technology. And what gives you such strong conviction?
So there's two main things. One is that it's just the only one scaling. So I imagine that might seem like a bit of a controversial statement to some people in this room, but at Unbounded, we define scaling in kind of an empirical way, where if something else starts scaling, we'll be really happy to look at that ecosystem, which is as more people use the blockchain and more transactions occur, does the transaction cost get cheaper or more expensive? So we've done an analysis on basically every public blockchain that is popular today, and we found that there's no other blockchain in the world that has that property. So our lives would be a lot easier if there were multiple, but we live in a world when today that's the only one. So that I'd say is the most important thing, and that's, when we first started focusing on this ecosystem a few years ago, we saw the potential for this, and now we've seen billions of transactions later this actually happening. So I'd say that's probably the number one thing, and then with a really close second is many of the founders that you've heard from today. So because of the broader phenomenon in crypto and blockchain that Jimmy was speaking to, crypto attracts a lot of really short-term oriented founders. Because today, if you want to try to turn hustle and idea and the ability to pitch well into millions of dollars for yourself in the next year or two, you should probably start some token on like a Near, Solana, or Avalanche. That's probably the most likely way you can do it. Mm-hmm. So as a result, I think the quality of founders in crypto broadly is quite low compared to most other technology markets. But if you're building on BSV today, you're picking the blockchain that you think is most likely to cause your business long-term success, but at, with rare exception, like kind of personal and business cost in the short term. So it shows that you're a long-term thinker and that you're able to make hard decisions that are not popular, even when you have friends that work in crypto that think that this is a bad decision for you and they're not really aware of some of these advantages. So the fact that there's just so many quality entrepreneurs building in the space, that from our count, it's the third largest developer and entrepreneurial ecosystem in the world after Ethereum and Solana. The developers and entrepreneurs, and then just the fundamental tech, those are the two things that give me the most conviction. But Mike, when we started talking, I didn't even really know about BSV. We were investing in all sorts of things. So similar to how our fund really learned and evolved, if another blockchain came along and started to work, we would be really bullish on it, and we're definitely open to changing our minds in terms of where our focus is. So I'd say I'm extremely bullish on the BSV ecosystem today, but we'll learn and evolve as new data comes in.
So can I address
yeah,
on that?
Yeah.
I get asked about this a lot, about why I support BSV around the world, because I'll just be really candid in ways where I may have not been
like
before.
You're not, usually.
No, I'll be really candid. I have so many people around the world who I meet, particularly business, government people, because I appeal to them. They always say to me, we don't like most crypto people, we like you. It's my professional background and my personality. And what they'll say is, why are you in BSV? We really like you. We hear BSV's crazy. We don't get it. There's it's almost an intellectual inconsistency. Because to be blunt, yeah, BSV has, I think it is technologically the most powerful chain that should take over the world. It has been limited by the reputational challenges that it faces. And every entrepreneur in this room that will watch this video understands that. You all call me to talk confidentially about it. I listen, I completely empathize, I get it, I live with it every day. And why I continue to believe is that Bitcoin as a protocol and network is battle tested. All the new chains that come out that you hear about and you get excitement about for a year like Solana run into problems. We see this consistently. And it's not that I wish them problems, but it's probably going to happen because it's really difficult to design a blockchain protocol that works. And that also doesn't just scale, but has the technical capabilities in it to deliver not just payment and micropayment capabilities, but all of the data potential that people talk about, smart contracts, tokenization, computation, IoT device management. So it's not that I'm religious to Bitcoin, even though I've worked with Calvin and Craig all of these years. I've, of course, learned a lot about it. It's that, in my mind, having seen one data network, the internet, grow at mass scale and change the world, I've just seen that Bitcoin at scale, in the form of BSV, has all of the ingredients that are necessary to fulfill that vision, and more importantly, is the most battle-tested, which is something that's key for entrepreneurs as well as enterprises and governments that are looking to build on something that's reliable. And so that's why I try to explain that to people. But for the investors in the room, it's not to make you skittish, BSV investment is not the place you go to if you're trying to turn a quick buck. Don't. BSV is the place to go to if you believe in an ecosystem and founders and people like me who are willing to put our time, personal credibility, relationships, and lives on the line because we believed in this as a technologically powerful solution that could actually focus the blockchain industry on just being useful.
Yeah. And just to speak to what Jimmy is saying, you know, when I first started looking at the Bitcoin SV ecosystem, I was like, wow, one day everyone's just gonna like do the research, like read stuff, and then they're gonna like understand this thing makes sense to build on. I think that's pretty improbable at this point. I think the way that people are gonna start to be excited about BSV companies is by one of the companies, which we think is really likely to be in this room today, take off and have millions or tens of millions of dollars in revenue. That's going to be probably the thing that moves it. So the way we're moving that forward and what our outlook is that, you know, is that going to happen tomorrow? Probably not. But is that going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years? We think very strong possibility. So I would encourage anyone, whether it's with, you know, BSV or blockchain or something else, if you have something that you really believe in, you know, Mike said this for years and I didn't really understand the importance of it, but, you know, show not tell.
So I'm curious. Micropayments, we talked a lot about that today, and gaming. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's the obvious entry point in the angle where other chains can't compete. I want to talk more about the data side of it. You know, as an enterprise salesperson myself, when are we going to see enterprises, big and small, but Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies start to utilize the data aspects of this ledger in a meaningful way, and not just on the fringe?
You mean a BSV or any blockchain?
Let's focus on BSV because we just said that it was the most scalable, but I want to see like an Amazon Web Services. I think Jack talked about it a little bit with Asset Layer, but an Amazon type deployment where the data is affordable enough to be put on chain, so it has real world uses in insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, healthcare, in the Fortune 500.
Yeah, I think it's a longer path than most of us would like to see, because the reality is when you're trying to deliver things at enterprise level, first you have a longer sales cycle. The startups here have to actually build the products, and when you do B2B sales, I used to do professional business development, it's just a longer sales cycle, right, than doing consumer applications. Secondly, if you're talking about use of data, for example, let's take supply chain as an example. I just had a nice call with Stefan Nielsen from Unisat the other day about some things he's working on. If you want to move supply chain data to the blockchain, it's a great use of blockchain. But you have to get not just one company to do it. Ideally, you need to get most, if not all, of the companies in the supply chain using the same application. His solution, of course, is to integrate blockchain capability into existing ERP and supply chain software, such as SAP and Oracle software, so people don't have to change the actual underlying software. But you still have to get buy-in for more participants in the ecosystem. That just takes longer. Yeah. So the advice I have given him, as well as some of the other companies you might have heard speak at the Dubai BSV Global Blockchain Convention, is to identify smaller ecosystems, either regional or sub-specific portions of an industry. For example, they're targeting the food industry. Okay, you're not going to take on the whole food industry unless you have the commercial leverage of Walmart to move your entire ecosystem of supply chain. But if there is a local organic growing community of a certain limited number of companies that they can test pilot their product with, that will provide the use case example that's necessary to sell to the larger enterprises.
Right. I don't know if you have a point of view on that?
Not really too different from Jimmy here. You know, I think when, to your point on enterprise, just how we're thinking about it from Unbounded is we were initially a lot more excited about the near-term possibility of enterprise, and now I think we have a more sober view on just how long that takes. And the beginning focus of our investment in the scalable blockchain world looked at a lot of enterprise use cases, and now it's a lot more mixed. And frankly, I feel somewhat agnostic as to whether the thing that's going to really take off using a scalable blockchain first will be an enterprise application or a consumer application, or maybe something that really is kind of both. We'll really see.
Yeah. So
One of the areas I think you will see it more quickly in is in the IP enforcement world. I've been spending quite a bit of time recently because I used to be an IP lawyer. I'm invited now to speak at a lot of intellectual property counterfeit enforcement events around the world. There are already some interesting solutions that use NFTs, data on blockchain to verify the authenticity of things like luxury goods, things that are likely to be counterfeited and infringed. And that's a simpler use of blockchain for which there is a business incentive from the enterprise already. Because you have to get down to that. It's not using blockchain for blockchain's sake. What is the enterprise, what is their business incentive to use blockchain? Does it save them money? Does it create efficiency? Or in the case of IP enforcement, does it help to cut down on a big problem they have, which is counterfeit goods?
Yeah. So speaking of IP, what is, I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm going to ask it. There's some lawsuits going on that people may have heard about.
Really?
Yeah, the COPA Alliance, Coinbase, Craig.
Let's assume no one has here, though.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, maybe you can help define the what's happening on a scale here. And then the question is, what is, as a lawyer, what do you think the likely outcome will be for some of these cases that are out there? Most specifically, the COPA case.
Do you want to describe it?
Sure. So the COPA case.
I've actually been trying not to follow them.
Okay.
They were cluttering my brain.
So the COPA case, COPA is a nonprofit that's been funded largely by like Jack Dorsey personally, and his two main companies, Twitter and Square, as well as by Facebook and just a lot of kind of the who's who of Silicon Valley. And COPA has sued Craig Wright as he has basically claimed implicit ownership of the Bitcoin white paper copyright in the UK. And because copyright in the UK is implicit, it takes kind of a court challenge basically to say that you don't have the copyright. Again, this is my layman non-lawyer understanding of it. So that'd
be true in the United States too, even though you can register copyrights as well.
So this case is really kind of the case that's going to be most directly on the question of, did Craig Wright author the Bitcoin white paper, or is Craig Wright Satoshi? And that will take place in the UK, and it's starting relatively soon. So what are your thoughts on it,
Yeah, let's just say, I don't like to give litigation predictions. As a former litigator, I can tell you that lots of unpredictable things happen in litigation. I guess I'll answer it this way. Do I believe Craig is Satoshi Nakamoto? Yes. Do I believe it matters or should matter to the success of BSD long term? No, it should not matter. I know a lot of people want to make it matter. But I do believe he's Satoshi.
What about a time frame for some sort of resolution?
Of the COPA thing?
Settlement or an end of the...
I don't know. I've not been involved in the litigation strategy and things, and I'm preferring to focus my time on the building of useful things on blockchain.
All right, so fair enough. So the panel was, I told you he was a lawyer. He's a good one too. So the focus of the panel is, what's the vision for the future? So we've gone back, we've gone to the present day. Let's look ahead. So let's take, I don't know, a 10 or 15-year horizon. We'll start with you, Zach. And what do you think that the landscape's going to look like 10 to 15 years down the road? Is it one chain only that rules them all? Is it multiple chains? Is it integrated chains? Is it, what do you think it looks like, and what do you think the challenges are to get there?
So I think looking at the development of internet and intranet technologies is really instructive for looking at the future of blockchain and crypto. So in the mid-90s, what we saw was significantly more interest and capital invested into intranet technologies. Each company, each different industry, use case having its own intranet. And the dominant view kind of sound a lot like today, which is each use case is going to have its own intranet. So while there's still intranet technology today, that view lost people hundreds of billions of dollars when the internet thing kind of won out as the main way that we communicate around the world and transfer information. So I view a similar future for blockchain, where today there's going to be lots of different cryptos for lots of different currencies and use cases, lots of different blockchains for all the different use cases and things. And I think that's likely going to go away. And the vast majority of money that's been invested into companies using crypto and blockchain and into crypto assets is going to tumble towards zero. But that much, much more value will accrue to companies that leverage an extremely scalable blockchain. And because of the network effects of data, I think it's extremely likely for there to, by and large, be one blockchain. I think there will definitely be other blockchains for small, very niche things, especially ones that are explicitly trying to evade government regulation. But in terms of blockchain for compliant, normal business purposes, I think it's extremely unlikely we have more than one blockchain for the same reason it's really unlikely we have more than one internet. So what does that look like? I mean, we're investing in what we think are some of the most promising use cases in the near term, but in terms of what things are going to look like 10 or 15 years in the future, honestly, I'd just be completely full of shit if I was trying to say I had any idea. So the one prediction I would make for that is just that blockchain will be a core part of the tech stack for basically every business. And how that will gain adoption, whether it will be big data first, fintech, micropayments for gaming, we've placed our bets in terms of some of those infrastructure companies that you've heard from today. But after that, as long as people adopt blockchain and take advantage of its unique properties, we have hoped to make investments such that we do well no matter how that plays out.
Future predictions from you, Jerry? What do you think?
Well, there are far too many darn blockchains and cryptocurrencies right now. We're at we're getting 20,000 plus coins. It's ridiculous. It's completely unnecessary. And the reason why there's far too many blockchains is because Bitcoin was not allowed to scale originally. Had it been allowed to scale originally, Ethereum would not have been created as an alternative chain for the more data usages. And that's what led people to realize, oh, I can make my own coin and ICOs and all of a sudden make all this money, which then led to splintering to more and more chains. So we can't go back in time, but I agree with Zach that the world would have been better off with my vision, which was the theme of one of our conferences, to have one world, one chain, like we have one internet. It would reduce the challenge entrepreneurs, businesses, and governments face when they talk to me, which is, okay, we want to do something on blockchain, but why should we choose your chain versus these 20 others? And how do we know which will survive? And the answer is no one really does know. That is what has also slowed down the speed of blockchain adoption, because now companies are having to spend all this investigative due diligence time trying to pick a chain and make basically a bit of a gamble on it. So I do think that will consolidate. I wish it would be easier to just have one chain in the world. I don't know that at this point in time that's realistic. I think it will consolidate down to a leading set of chains with various different usages. I also believe that even though BSV can scale to hold all of the world's data, that not everything belongs on a blockchain. And just because you can put data or information or files on a blockchain, you don't need to. I agree with Zach that companies will have blockchain as part of their tech stack. But one of the conversations I've had a lot around the world, especially with government entities, particularly in the Middle East, is they're concerned about putting public data or government-owned data on a public chain because they feel like they can't control it, even if you can encrypt it and obfuscate it. And some companies, private companies in sensitive areas like healthcare have the same concern. I predict the more likely move to blockchain storage and use of data is to have data still stored off-chain by some entities and using a public chain like BSV to hash, timestamp the data to assure the integrity of it, to use the blockchain cryptographic keys to allow access to things. But I do not foresee a world where all of the world's data will move onto blockchain, even though it could. I think there will still be a value to off-chain data, which then leads to a conversation I have with some people around the world, which is I get asked to help spin up private chains a lot, right? Okay, maybe we'll do this on your public chain, and what if we had our own private chain here, and we'll spin up our own nodes and basically take the Hyperledger approach. And so I do think particularly government entities will consider that as an option, using the public chain for some things like timestamping, but maintaining their data either in a private database or what is their own equivalent of a permission chain, because that has actually been a request I've received from several governments.
And I think, do we have time to open it up for some questions?
Do we?
5, yeah, and if you
So-
wanted to say one last thing, what's next in the life of Jimmy Nguyen? What is next? So you're no longer in charge of the Bitcoin Association?
Yeah, my last day technically is the end of the month, so I've been getting lots of sleep recently. In short, I know a lot of people have been asking, not just here, but just around the world. I will be doing many things, and so I have far more opportunities knocking on my door over the last months than I have time to do. A lot of them are in the blockchain space and beyond. And so you'll be seeing it. I won't be doing just one thing. I'll be doing a mix of things, but using as a lot of the opportunities to support the growth of BSV for the things that I think it really needs now, not just more investment, but business.
So
the BSV ventures need revenue and business.
So
partners.
it's
time to focus on that more.
we're quite appreciative of all that you've done and all you've given over the last, 10 years plus driving this. So we're grateful, and thank you so much for being here. And
Of course, and I'm not
sharing your
going
wisdom.
anywhere. You'll all still see me.
Okay. So yeah, I think we've got a few minutes, I think. If there are any
Yeah,
folks that have any questions.
Couple questions.
Yeah, and please wait for the mic before asking.
Over here in the white.
So we got one question from Brandon Bryant. He works at Handcash. And, I don't have my phone on me, but if you've been here today, you've received many pennies and dollars from me.
Yeah, Jimmy, as an IP attorney and former CEO of nChain, can you evaluate what effect does the nChain patent portfolio actually have on the future? Because as a developer, I it's over my head, so I'd be curious to get your opinion on does that matter?
Well, I'm not going to speak for them, but I will tell you it all depends on how much and to what extent the patent holder and chain enforces patents. You can have the biggest portfolio in the world, but until you choose to enforce them and choose an enforcement strategy,
Can you evaluate the strength of the patents they hold? Is that a metric usually?
yes, but
That costs
patents-
about $2,000 an hour.
Not that much, but close. From my lawyering days. Patents get stronger once they are challenged and tested. And challenges and tests can happen in different ways. They can happen in actual court litigation. They can also happen through what are called inter partes proceedings before patent offices to challenge or invalidate patents before administratively. And if a patent survives that, and it survives litigation, then it's actually stronger when you do IP valuations of patent portfolios. It's one of the things a valuation firm will look at. Is it just a patent that's been granted, and has it been challenged in some form and survived those challenges? Because sometimes when you litigate patents or challenge them in patent offices, the claims, which are the important part of the patents, get sometimes narrowed, where the patent survives, but if it has 18 claims, 3 of them are knocked out, or they get narrowly construed by a court. So it's difficult to evaluate the strength of a patent until that happens. I certainly have my views on which of the nChain patents I think are stronger than others and have broader application than others. Because the thing you have to remember about a lot of these patents is many of them are not even limited, they're not limited to Bitcoin or BSV. A lot of them are for any type of blockchain or distributed ledger, and some of the patents aren't even limited to blockchain. Some of the patents are about other cryptographic techniques that could be used for access to any type of digital resource. So, and I haven't followed the patent portfolios closely in the last few years, so it's harder for me to comment on the newer ones. But it's good to have a large patent portfolio as part of an arsenal. That's what a lot of big companies do for not just offensive but defensive purposes. You saw that in the mobile phone device wars between Samsung and Apple. But it's how you are willing to use them or not, either legally or commercially, that I think will define them. And I know that doesn't exactly answer your question, but I'm not the one that's going to be sitting in the back deciding how and when to enforce those patents.
So maybe one more question.
Well, since this is the last, this is for all three of you. I love the comment, one world, one chain. And so I really would love the three of you to tell me today what you think your top 5 chains are, but you might not want to do that. I was at Yahoo during Web 1, and we were always talking about our users, our customers. We were certainly not out there going, hi, do you want JavaScript with your Yahoo Mail? And so I feel like the communication today is so tech-driven, and consumers are completely confused.
Yeah.
So when do you think the market will shift? I mean, I know as an entrepreneur, I'm going to help shift it, but like from your viewpoint, when will we move to thinking about the marketplace and what people really want versus chains and technology, et cetera?
So I'm going to answer the second question. The top 5 chains would be pretty tough. But what I can say confidently is that I think people will move from thinking about change to solutions once solutions actually exist using blockchain. You know, right now people are, I think, rightly skeptical of a lot of things or don't have really high expectations because, you know, many billions of dollars has been wasted going into largely glorified Ponzi schemes. And the companies that make money off those, like crypto exchanges, miners, prime brokers, a lot of the companies, you know, most investors that are, quote, excited about crypto or blockchain infrastructure are excited about. So I think as long as that's where the capital is going, we're not going to really see any meaningful results. And we're going to keep talking theoretically about, oh, which chain is good, which chain is whatever. I think once you've seen some companies really take off, divorced from speculation, so I'm not talking about another Axie Infinity, not talking about another Helium, a company that is able to make money and provide value independent of people speculating on a crypto token. Once those take off, I think we're going to see the conversation shift. And I have strong conviction that it's really unlikely we're going to see companies be able to do that on a chain that isn't Bitcoin SV today. But that could change in the future.
Yeah, I'd answer that the following way. What payment rails does Venmo use? What database does Facebook use?
That's what I was going to say. Eventually, we have to move to a world where consumers, businesses, don't even know what blockchain it's on, or even that it's on a blockchain, right? It's how the internet works today. You don't really think about what IP email protocol is being used. It just is, right? Blockchain is a distributed data network. That's it. One day, it'll be, as Craig Wright likes to say, it's plumbing. Right now, we view it as an investment asset and class because it's gotten a lot of attention. But I think the most successful businesses and trends will be fulfilling the potential of blockchain as underlying data infrastructure that you don't really see, which is why the attention in investment now is coming to things that are putting out coins, NFTs, things that can make money really fast. Totally understandable. And those will still exist. I think the long-term value, or I'm getting a lot of requests to work, is with companies and organizations that are delivering blockchain infrastructure solutions to make it easier for other businesses to build on it. So for example, one of my really best friends is an investor in Alchemy, and they are delivering a lot of the infrastructure solutions that make it easier for other companies to use certain chains. One of the blockchain venture funds that I had speak at the Dubai BSV Global Conference, Spice, you know, they're in the middle of raising their second fund, and their investment thesis as a blockchain venture fund is very much on the shovels and picks, as people call it, but really on investing in other companies that make platforms and tools to make it easier for the end user, whether it's a consumer, business, or government, to use blockchain without one day even knowing it, right? You know, I'd love to see a future where, you know, smart contracts happen without people needing to know smart contract coding capabilities, right? It's like building the WordPresses of the world, which led to a proliferation of websites because you don't need to know HTML coding, at least not much, in order to build websites. So I encourage all of you in this room, as you're thinking about what role you want to play in the blockchain and digital asset space, hopefully focus on BSV, to think about how the long-term value of your contributions can really drive infrastructure solutions that make it just easier to leverage the power of this blockchain technology for anything from games, micropayments, supply chain, governments, voting, just to making all of our lives healthier and better. I think that's the long-term win.
I think that's a great place to end.
Jimmy, Mike, thank you so much.